Hi, everyone. Welcome to the session on winning the war for talent. Got myself and Brian McGarvey here. We'll introduce ourselves in a moment and take you through a presentation. Unfortunately, with this being virtual, we're not going to do a lot of live Q&A, but go through some of the themes we've been seeing about the state of the global manufacturing workforce and then how we can help augment and engage that workforce. So with that quick introduction to myself, my name is Jessica. I lead the customer success team at Tulip. Background is in discrete manufacturing and aerospace and defense, and then spent some time in consulting before coming over to Tulip for the last 3.5-ish years and have worked with a number of customers across industries, helping them deploy. Got Brian with me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brian McGarvey. I'm on the strategic account management team. I work with some of our largest general manufacturing enterprise customers and helping their senior leadership think through deployments of Tulip and also realizing value. Prior to Tulip, I was a submarine officer in the United States Navy, went to business school, and then had a background in consulting where I focused on manufacturing and business strategy, which is how I found my way to Tulip for the last 1.5 years.
So getting into the agenda today, there's 3 main sections that we are going to walk through. The first is more broader themes on what we've been seeing in global manufacturing workforce as far as workforce trends, what they're looking for, what some of the challenges are. The second section is more about how do you start addressing this? What are some ways to think about engaging the workforce, upskilling the workforce? And then the last section is more on how to make your workers your competitive advantage. So how do you really start competing for talent? And we have some examples to share from what we've seen across our customer base. For the first section on current state of the global manufacturing workforce, we're going to start sharing some data, some general trends here. The first major theme that we've been seeing is that the manufacturing workforce is changing. The 2 main points here, one of them being with generational turnover, which has been occurring in manufacturing for years. Like I will say, when I was on the shop floor, there was a significant portion of our operator workforce who were, in the later stages of their careers, who had spent their whole lives in the shop floor, knew machines like the back of their hand, but they were all leaving along with their tribal knowledge. And that's been happening for a while now. The younger generation that's coming in tend to be more tech savvy. They've grown up swiping things in apps and whatnot, but they're also looking for a very different work environment. And that's a general statement across industries, not just manufacturing. They're more inclined to leave their jobs. They're more interested and willing to change companies and jobs. So with that context, we also have a fairly widespread shortage in manufacturing for labor. We've seen, I think we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but the general percentage of unemployment has been very low in manufacturing for the last year. It's more of a US-centric metric, but it's been true for everywhere we've seen. Next major topic we're going to talk about is the way in which people work is changing. So we've talked about the type of people coming into the workforce is changing, and then the way that those people actually work has also been changing. 3 main things we're going to run through. Digital transformation has been around for decades. It started out, I think, in CAD programming back in like 70s or 80s, if you look it up. So the concept has been around for a while, but for manufacturing, it's been a very slow roll over to manufacturing shop floors, really embracing digital tools, not just as an ERP or an MES system, but to really think about how can we get all of our data digital? How can we make workers more efficient by giving them what they need? So that theme has been emerging in a much stronger way across many, many major companies that we've seen in a lot of our partners as well, who in their client base. So that's evolving. There's more digital tools. It improves the quality of work that people are able to do. Second major thing is hybrid work environment. We all lived through COVID and the impact that had on remote work, and the expectations that people have on a hybrid work environment or remote work is different, and they know that there are options out there. So now we're seeing manufacturers and those more traditional companies compete with companies who can offer a hybrid work environment or something else, and workers have this larger concept of what other work environments can be like. And then workers also want to have a growth trajectory. They want to be able to develop, and they're going to look for that in the companies that they're working for. So they're no longer coming to companies thinking, hey, I just want a job and a paycheck for the next 10 years. Brian, anything you want to add, things you've seen?
I think all that really holds true, especially around the hybrid work environment and the growth trajectory, especially around, the younger generation, be able to understand how they can make an impact.
All right. So now we're going to move to a slide that has numbers on it. It's a survey result from Deloitte. They did a survey with manufacturing-focused companies. It was about 100 or a little over 100 executive senior leaders in the manufacturing space. And this captures the sentiment around how important talent retention is and gaining talent is to leadership. So 30%-ish, 33% of surveyed executives say retaining high-performing employees is a strategic priority. It's always a priority for most companies, but it's strategic priority now because they recognize the time and investment needed to upskill and retrain workers. And then challenges that they've mentioned for managing a production workforce. The top ones by quite a bit are retaining the existing talent. There's general acknowledgement of the skill set in a lot of manufacturing industries is not the skill set the younger generation is coming in with as far as understanding how to think about machines, equipment, that sort of environment. So there's that and finding the right talent. And then again, there's always going to be having competitive wage and benefit packages, providing career advancement opportunities, which gets into employee engagement and how we keep employees once we have them, and then providing continuous skill development to keep upskilling those teams. I mentioned this briefly, but what I was going to mention here is the unemployment rate the last couple of months, so May through July 2023 in the US in the manufacturing sector, has been in the 2.5 to 2.7 range. So it's still quite low, which means that there is competition and workers typically have the opportunity to think about somewhere else. I think, right, you and I have talked about examples of we've been in shops where I have an hourly worker, I pay them X amount, Home Depot pays them $2 an hour more or something, and they're gone. There's no reason they're going to stay in a manufacturing environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's certainly a common theme is I've been able to go to different manufacturing facilities of our customers across the country. And yeah, it's something that's at the forefront of a lot of the leadership mind, exactly that, Home Depot or other competitors and aren't necessarily directly adjacent to manufacturing. So
next slide we're looking at is a poll that we did a little bit earlier. So this is before this session. We polled, I think it was nearly 100 people who are in the general manufacturing industry, digitization type sector. And they were talking about what their biggest labor challenges are. Most people just said everything on here, which is training new employees efficiently and quickly, improving worker engagement, morale, which leads to retainment, seasoned workers leaving and then hiring new talent. So just dealing with turnover, everything involved with it. And then decreasing workforce errors on the shop floor was smaller, but again, the majority of people said everything. And there's there's multiple variables that lead to all of these decreasing workforce errors. There are many things process related, tooling related. Not everything is workforce related, but certainly what we might call tribal knowledge can contribute to decreasing errors. People who just have the tenure, who've seen it before, who can fix things on their own, and what they're doing isn't documented. All of that can contribute to some of the pain a lot of manufacturers are feeling.
Yeah, just one thing to add though, these problems aren't necessarily new, but I think the way that you can solve them has changed, and that's obviously where we'll spend the latter half of this deck. But just acknowledging that, hey, certainly any of these problems that we teed up aren't something that happened in the last 5 years or anything like that. But certainly the tools are changing.
Yeah, excellent point. And yes, 100%. Especially with manufacturing, the tribal knowledge concept, that has always been true, but our ability to address it is vastly different today than it was 20 years ago. Second to last slide in this section, a couple more numbers to go through, just thinking about the competition in the manufacturing environment. So we got some statistics for you that U.S. employee turnover in the manufacturing industry in general is about 40%, which is extremely high. You think about, I've got 100 people and 40 of them leave within a year, and I have to retrain new people, get them set up, teach them all of the jobs. If you're cross-training your workforce, you got to think about the entire skills matrix and working them through it again. So it creates a ton of inefficiency for the rest of the organization, and you end up investing a lot more to every individual just to get things up and running. I know some companies have trainer type roles. Some of those have maybe been eliminated due to cost in the past. I've also seen that. And there creates these pockets of it's difficult to keep people trained. And I'm painting a relatively negative picture, but Brian's going to brighten it later with all the things we can do to help make addressing this problem easier, more efficient, less work for everybody, and also a better experience for both the employee and the employer. And then the lower blue box on the median tenure of workers who are ages 55 to 64 is more than 3x that of workers 25 to 34. Understanding, yes, there's an age difference, so that might suggest why some of the tenure is longer. The main point here is the expectation is when the workers who are 25 to 34 today are in that 54 to 64 years old category, they are not going to have that same statistic of we've been at the same company for 3x this original tenure, because they're going to leave much more often. So the expectation now is companies will need to have more robust, systematic things in place to help upskill, reskill, train new workers, because the expectation is that people will leave roles more often. So you need more process and structure in place. So in summary, workplace expectations of the new generation has changed. We went over that, how competitive the environments are today. And we're really moving toward manufacturers need to change, provide different tools to meet this environment and meet this challenge. All right, now that we have that stage set, how are we going to augment, engage, upskill your workforce? What are things you can tactically start doing to try to retain your workforce, train them faster, keep them engaged? So from a high-level thought standpoint, we're going to talk about digital augmentation and how digital tools can empower your workforce to contribute to the actual workplace itself, be engaged, add their ideas, keep them interested in the environment and feeling like they're helping improve it, as well as quite literally improving the processes. They're using digital tools to do that, and they can also use it to train the workforce itself. So actually executing the training, recording the training, keeping that refreshed. And the concept that we're going to talk about is it's a human-centric approach, meaning we're not just throwing digital tools and system at people, telling them, hey, you got to click through this stuff. We're trying to make systems that operate specifically for the people that they're serving. So it's a really more bespoke approach to giving people an efficient digital tool that matches the environment they're in. I'm going to run through that a bit more in this slide with multiple icons. What we're going through is legacy systems. I mentioned ERP before, MES, like enterprise resource planning, manufacturing execution systems. These types of legacy systems have been around for decades. They're not new, but they were designed around certain processes and data structures. They weren't designed for the humans who are using them. So the interface, anyone who's using ERP, like how many clicks do you have to click to get to the number that you're trying to update for the work order? You get there and they're like, how do I get out of this? The systems weren't designed for people, right? They're not human-centric. They were designed around a certain process to capture data. And in the 90s, great. It was so much better than what you had before because you had no data and the internet didn't used to exist. But we're beyond that now. So the point with the human-centric side of this slide is we can design digital tools and data structures and interfaces and the workflows that those digital tools run through around the actual humans who are executing them to make it efficient and capture the data that they need. So that's the concept that Tulip embraces and is founded on, is built around. And these types of tools are what we think can help retain the workforce, keep them engaged, all that beautiful stuff.
Jess, that's a really good point. I think that, and I hope that resonates with everyone listening. Going to different facilities at different, our customers across the country and oftentimes the world, it's still very human-centric, right? Machines aren't doing everything. It's still people that are the center and the core of everything that's happening. So now that, again, we're moving past I think Jess said it really well. It's, in the 90s, this was great. The internet didn't exist, before that, which is hard to believe. But, we've moved into an age where, we can do better. And I think that's where we're trying to get to, at helping, build these systems to retain talent. Really, I think the theme comes down to is that manufacturers need to adapt to ensure that workers are engaged to help retain talent on that theme. So we were thinking about two different buckets, again, this is very generalized, but have two different types of workers that are typically in manufacturing operations. You have your salaried workers and also you have hourly workers. For salaried workers, our perspective is that, they really want to be able to take things to the next level and be empowered to innovate and drive creative solutions. So have the tools to actually make their, the manufacturing facility and their four walls better, right? They want to actually have the tools to help to do that, to drive improvements, implement changes quickly, and embrace the, digital solutions to help them scale across, their factory, their front lines, as well as other, other factories if they sit more at a corporate level. And then hourly workers, being able to provide business value. And so that's, that might be being able to, just simply know the expectations for the job that you're assigned and how is success defined. Am I winning or losing? Am I doing am I doing what is expected of me? And then also being able to rotate through jobs and knowing that, that I have, different, I'm not just going to be stuck on this one line or this one role, but that there's an ability to rotate through in a meaningful way. And also experience, what we call gamification or other, reward structures that highlight the value of their work. And we'll talk a little bit about how, a digital solution like Tulip could do that. But ultimately, a lot of it is, leveraging modern tools and technology. Kind of in summary for both these, again, very broad groups of individuals and of workers, both salaried and hourly. We really believe that, making an impact and seeing the value of their work is something that they, both groups of people care about. A core tenet of this whole cultural shift and being able to retain and attract talent here is developing a continuous improvement culture that drives engagement with your workers. One element of this is training workers more effectively. So being able to update the processes and build out the quality compliance documentation in a meaningful way that humans can actually engage with. That's not laborious to, just, cross T's and dot I's, but it's actually part of their job. But if they, it's actually meaningful that they complete this. And then retaining employees more effectively, meaning defining standard work processes and feedback loops, establishing skill matrices. I think we have some really good examples later on in the deck that show how, other customers, some of our customers have actually put this to action in a really meaningful way. So diving a little bit deeper, digital tools allow, your training, management, content execution to be more efficient and effective. So, digital tools aren't recreating the game of your training concepts or training management concepts, defining capabilities and skills, tracking those skills in some kind of matrix, defining refresher requirements, having, the right training content for workers, whether it's a new process, a task, upskilling, or establishing just-in-time trainings are all really core elements of a training management process and system. But the digital tools such as Tulip can help really use those, help improve the efficiency of that. As an example, so just imagine that, you're running a SKU that you haven't run in, 3 months. With something like Tulip, you'd be able to understand that, hey, 50% of the people that are about ready to go, put this, assemble this SKU, 50% of them weren't there the last time we ran it. Maybe it's one of your more complex SKUs. So you have that insight to understand that, hey, almost, half of your workforce and all that just went through and ran that SKU are no longer on that line or no longer in your company. And so you'd be able to provide just-in-time training or just-in-time training for all the lessons learned that you guys that you may have had around, quality defects that came out as a result of poor training the last time. And so those are the types of insights that you might be able to start getting with kind of an integrated system like Tulip, where it's not only just training, but it's also your operations, your quality, and you're bringing all this data together to get insights.
And a couple anecdotes or examples of folks, as you've mentioned before, Brian, a lot of the concepts we're talking about, basic stuff, they've always existed. You have training, everyone knows training matrices, you've got them posted on a whiteboard somewhere, it's all good stuff. With a digital tool, you can start doing things like verifying, is this person, person logs in, are you trained on this operation or on this product SKU? System will check the training matrix in real time. If not, I might have to show you an error or send an alert to someone. So you're able to do things quicker. And you can also implement things like, if not, maybe I route you to the training and you can say hey, do you want to run through the refresher training now because you're actually out of date? That operator can do that on their own time. Maybe it takes 15, 20 minutes and they're unblocked, as opposed to having that machine sit idle for the next 6 hours because someone didn't realize that they were not trained on it and they couldn't find a supervisor in time. So there's all these efficiencies that you can start seeing with connecting the right data with the right people and places at the right time. And these are some of the things that digital tools can enable.
Yeah, and it offers the flexibility to make it work for you and your operations. And as Jess had mentioned, that's one example. Another, I just want to stress that I think it's pretty brilliant, Another example of a customer that chose to do this in a different way is same thing. Hey, they check to make sure that so first of all, they build extremely complex machines that does require actual training. They check a skills matrix before this person is about ready to do a portion of their work instruction and their steps. If that person is not trained and it tells them, and if they want to proceed and try and get approval, it sends a randomized 4-digit number to the training supervisor and the quality manager to their cell phones, and they have to come over to their terminal and type in that 4-digit number to provide them authorization to be able to proceed. Again, it's all documentation. It's showing that they're trained or that they have authorization to do that. But again, it's something that normally you wouldn't be able to do, or you wouldn't at least have the record keeping and you wouldn't have the visibility to even understand that person wasn't trained to begin with. So again, a lot of different ways to approach the problem. That you can make it as unique to your situation as you want, but it's pretty powerful when you see it in action. Which is, I think, a good segue into how to actually do this. So, how to make workers your competitive advantage, and to get started winning the war on talent. So in this next section, we'll kind of talk through some of the more tactical examples that, from a framework standpoint, as well as highlighting some sanitized examples from customers that we've seen that we think are powerful to talk through, again, just as examples, but, would be good to share with the audience. Before we get started, though, there's this kind of digital transformation, right? This is where kind of all in this theme. We're talking about digital tools, digital transformation, and kind of what the expectation versus reality is. I know when I started, getting involved in manufacturing a number of years ago, my expectation was something more aligned to the picture you see on your screen on the left here, where it's, robots and machines and this clean room and just everything seamlessly working and there's no issues at all, right? It's just everything works. But that's not the case. And if it is, good for you, but it's not the case that we've seen with a lot of our customers. Where the reality is that, hey, it's still very human-centric, which is not a problem, but it's human-centric, it's messy, requires a lot of intervention, and a lot of it's paper-driven, right? And everything's recorded on paper, and, there's data that's locked and siloed and, on paper that might make it into Excel. But again, it's not this, this futuristic, 100% autonomous, assembly line in most cases. And so we really have to start asking ourselves kind of like, okay, like where do we start? How do we, how would you even get started? And I think we were thinking about some good questions here around just kind of like, almost kind of like a litmus test in terms of, where kind of are you on that spectrum? And again, this is kind of fed from our experiences working with hundreds of customers. Kind of the first is, understanding your targets. If you were to go out to your shop floor worker and ask, what's your goal for today? Do you think they would know? Oftentimes the answer is likely no, or you ask them, are they ahead or behind track of what their expectation is? It's likely, I don't know. And they may have to go, it's usually pretty transparent to them in terms of what the expectations are. The other is, around feedback loops is when was the last time a worker's feedback was actually implemented? How long did it take to implement that feedback? And did the person who made their recommendation ever find out that their feedback was implemented? And around recognition is, do you have a way to recognize employees who make process improvements? Again, it's that kind of like the last part of the feedback loop. But, in terms of like our themes around attracting and retaining talent, this is around that continuous improvement mentality, that culture of continuous improvement. And likely if these three questions kind of come back in a negative, then, this is likely something that is required. And so we're working on it off of a framework on where you can get started to build and the foundation to attract and retain talent. And so kind of the first part of this is performance management, which goes to that first question is, empowering workers to understand what their expectations are with the clear goals and real-time visibility to performance against those goals. And that will, allow you to start building a continuous improvement culture where you're defining feedback loops and to recognize employees who make improvements. And through that, you're going to spin up and get more employee engagement, right? If people feel like they're heard, they know what their expectations are, that's going to empower workers to innovate further and to create solutions and actually expend energy on high value tasks. And ultimately that's creating a desirable work environment, which helps you to retain and attract the right types of talent, because ultimately employees will feel valued and that they can achieve their career growth. But we ultimately recognize that, hey, we're all, you're running a business, right? So this has to, ultimately this is going to affect your bottom line. It's great to be able to help retain and attract talent and keep employees engaged. But how does that actually affect, the P&L? Well, ultimately, we believe that this helps make a more competitive business structure for our customers. And that's through increasing productivity and improved product quality, because you're able to train the right workers, keep them engaged, keep them in your facility, understand the knowledge that they have, and build this culture of continuous improvement and employee engagement. Jess, anything else to add?
Maybe just a couple examples to help solidify this, because depending on what folks have seen, they may have heard performance management a gajillion times and understand it really well, or they may not have, and like just setting that foundation for what makes sense. Performance management conceptually in manufacturing, again, been around for decades. You can do it extremely well with the whiteboard. If you've got your production hour by hour board up there, people log their defects. You have shift start meetings where you go over performance for the last shift, performance for the last day, like what your main defects were. That alone establishes a really great culture where people feel like they're informed, they know what the goals are, they're more likely to be able to make good decisions on their own with it while they're doing their work. And that helps set that foundation for continuous improvement culture that, as Brian mentioned, that can help drive down some of the cost of recruiting and attracting and retaining talent. The unlock with digital is it becomes so much easier and faster to create this information and to give it to people real time. So it should lower the barrier of implementing good performance management, because you have better data available to you than you did before. And you don't have to have someone go right on the whiteboard every hour in case they forget. Like, I've implemented performance management at multiple sites pre-Tulip. Like, this is before I worked at Tulip. So in the old school manner of whiteboards and whatnot, and we saw uplift in KPIs just from doing that. So if you can imagine doing it with a digital system where you can pull up dashboards in real time and like display a dashboard on the shop floor and help people be engaged and know if they're meeting their targets or not, this ultimately should lead to what Brian was mentioning about a more competitive business overall. We're not just retaining talent for fun. I mean, we want people to be happy, but ultimately this should make the business better.
So yeah, now to get into some like more tangible examples of like kind of what I mean, like, until we build applications. And so we're going to highlight a couple examples that we think show the right characteristics and help drive this whole theme around digital solutions that drive continuous improvement. And some of that's through real-time performance visibility, as well as closed feedback loops. Just actually just mentioned, a lot of times when we see, sometimes at customers, there are no whiteboards, there's nothing visible, right? Hour by hour, there's no visibility. Other times, like, hey, there's whiteboards, there's, the last hour. Sometimes it's just, how do you do yesterday? But with a solution like Tulip, it actually provides real-time dashboards to give feedback to operators. So we've kind of separated the sections like worker impact and business impact. Remember, like the business being like that fifth category of like, how does this actually drive impact to the business, and kind of the worker impact, everything to the left of that. So, in this example right here, it's a really, really clean, we think it's a really clean application where it's literally showing, it's aggregating the hour by hour performance of a line by work order, gives the operators ability to, request assistance. It does a lot of really good things, but really what it's driving into from a worker impact standpoint is providing immediate feedback on whether they're on track or hitting targets. Are they winning or losing the hour? Are they winning or losing the shift? It allows them to resolve issues quickly by being able to call for assistance to the right people at the right time. So by issue, whether it's quality, maintenance, you name it, they can interact with the right people in real time, as opposed to having to go radio or walk around the shop and find something and have the line down. Like, they're getting resolution in real time. And it also decreases manual data entry. I've been to too many facilities where I've seen, hour by hour sheets that workers fill out, and then that is handed to a value stream leader at the end of the day. And that value stream leader hand jams that into Excel for the last hour of their day. And then by that time, the day's over, and they don't have any time to like react or to adjust, to make any decisions based on how they've done that day. Right. So kind of all the energy is expended just putting the data in. They're not able to think about, okay, how would I adapt to this tomorrow? What are the lessons learned from what actually happened on this shift? All this data would be flowing in real time. And so, they're able to make decisions in real time. And so that kind of gets to the business impact portion of this, where you are in reality able to course correct through the shift to meet your targets. And it enables your managers to actually manage proactively versus reactively. I've seen this at one of our customers where, we had the customer had found this great use case for Tulip. It was actually production monitoring. And I'd never met this gentleman before, but he came up to us. I was like, I love this. Thank you so much. It allows me to manage. It allows me to understand throughout the course of the shift. I can go up to certain people and go ask them, is something going on? Do you need help with something? And they're able to get back on track. And after that, they've seen a significant uplift in their productivity and throughput because he has a visibility where in previous days, he was only able to look back and say, we missed the day. We missed that shift. We'll try again better tomorrow. So just any examples you want to share, or let me move on?
I want to say move on in the sense of there are lots of examples of what production availability can look like. And as we've said, one of the beautiful things about Tulip is you can tailor them to your shop floor needs. So they don't, just for folks who maybe are less familiar with Tulip, I'll add, the screenshots you're looking at are not of some sort of standard module. By all means, we have templates, we have examples, like in Tulip, you could make it look like this. But if for your cell, your area, like however you have your shop floor organized, if you need to see data differently to make it most valuable to you, you can build it however you like in Tulip. So we've seen a variety of these types of dashboards with different data that just work well for the environment that they're implemented in.
Yeah. So the next example is more of a digital workflow example. So I'm just going to talk through how it can enable workers to be more productive, understand their goals. So instead of, kind of tracking hour by hour, maybe there's more of a complex assembly, or they actually have to go through work instructions and steps. Building a application in this manner, again, allows workers to understand their daily goals. It reduces the manual data entry or mundane work that is kind of, lower value add and can decrease your productivity. Again, you can build in the functionality to get to different stations more quickly, or get support to different stations more quickly through kind of add-on features and functionality. And then also know feedback is getting to the right team in real time. And that business impact, again, is having the availability to improve delivery and also improving quality through that step routing. The other important aspect here is, like, if you have an issue downstream or in part of your process, like, you're able to update your work instructions very quickly around, like, basically updating these applications to put in quality care points, for example, to inform operators to do something differently throughout a production run. Meaning, like, if you found there's a defect and you need to shift the way something is being manufactured, the way that an operator is assembling a part, you're able to implement that in real time, as opposed to changing a paper-based work instruction and hoping that an operator reads it and might catch it. Is it a good way to also kind of enforce that as well? Just anything else to add here?
A similar theme of there's so many different workflows, and whether it's work instructions that you can help create in Tulip, and this can help reinforce training when it's needed. I actually made one example, William, that this is a common ask, is to have the workflow available if the operator needs it, but for more tenured operators, to give them the ability to skip the workflow portion of certain tasks. And that's a very common approach that is taken if that's an approach that your quality team says is fine to do. So thinking through that of what's the most efficient way to make sure your workers are able to do their work well in a quality manner, but give them the tools that they need if they need it. Great.
So this next example, I think is just it is a great example that actually came from one of our customers, a system developer. And it's really about streamlining and outsizing a feedback loop. So the facility, they had a shop floor worker or somebody that was more in a lower management role that wanted to implement this application where on their daily Gemba walks, it was all paper-based. They weren't tracking, or they had no tracking on the tasks, on the performance of their Gemba walks or MDI, and any accountability for any follow-up actions. This is a super simple application where it allows people to perform these tasks and then also take note on action. So say, hey, I have a picture of the before state, and basically create an action with a person in charge, an urgency, the day it's due, the category, and then also put an owner, and again, that before picture, and allow it to be tracked and hold people accountable for actually fixing problems. It was amazing to see how this application, once it was developed, how people started using it so much and how many tasks got completed because people now had a tool to actually report issues and get them fixed in a timely manner. And it was also a way for the team to hold themselves accountable for issues. It also allowed them to prioritize issues, right? So what are the most urgent, what are the least urgent? Allowed management to understand, what's getting fixed, what are the outstanding issues, what are the blockers. So it really drove this really great feedback loop of issue resolution as well as accountability. another note too, just from like a functionality standpoint, if you're not super familiar with Tulip, is you can alert the right, like the right people as well. Like, so when you're developing an action for, in this case, developing an action for somebody to complete, you can notify that person via email, SMS, Slack, Teams, whatever, whatever that medium is, so they know that they have something that they need to do. Again, it was just like a really elegant example of a very simple concept that helped this site kind of like enforce that culture of continuous improvement, and the fact that people are actually taking action. It helps make an environment where people know that if they have an issue, it's getting resolved, and it also allows people to see the impact of their work. A couple testimonials from our customers. This one comes from a gentleman named Antonio Hill, who I get to work very closely with at Stanley Black & Decker, but just not reading directly off of his quote here. But again, he's emphasizing that across the facilities that he gets to visit, that people are the most important aspect, and that you need to make sure that that they are one of the key elements of whatever you implement. And so again, kind of going back to one of the earlier slides that Jess had mentioned with more system-based, and in the current state, we believe that it really needs to be human-centric. This is what we mean is that making sure that the people are at the heart of the systems that you design and the interactions of your facility. And then another kind of testimonial from now an operator at Stanley Black & Decker. I was actually at this facility last week and could see firsthand what impact this has had. But Oscar had said before this, he was going through papers all day, and it was tough to understand what the missing parts that they had, that were needed. It was tough to kind of get through that. They ultimately had a continuous improvement engineer that started to learn Tulip and develop this application for Oscar and their team. And it's made again, having seen the impact, it's made their lives much simpler to understand where the issues are and really be able to communicate across teams to be able to resolve issues. So it's been really good to see like the operator engagement is, kind of everyone through management through operators kind of engaged, and seeing the impact of this. And again, kind of driving that cultural improvement at sites and at our customers. So just to recap on today's critical themes, first one is workplace expectations of the new generation of workers has changed, and we believe that manufacturers need to change as well. Digital augmentation empowers manufacturers to break the cycle of constantly recruiting and training new talent. And by creating a repository of connected apps tailored for your organization, you can drive employee engagement while also boosting productivity. We really want to thank you for joining us today virtually for this session. And yeah, thank you very much.
Sure. Thanks, everyone. Hope you enjoy the rest of the upskilling sessions. Bye.